Welcome to Two Way tonight. Tonight, I'm Mark Halperin. Thank you for joining. President's Tariff event ended weeks of suspense and hours of suspense, even like a few minutes before the event. Places like the Wall Street Journal, and Bloomberg didn't know what he was going to announce. So now we know. And we're going to walk you through that, what he announced, what it means. I will tell you just my big headline is it all can come off. So, as I've been saying for a couple days, the announcement is the beginning. It's not the end. We'll talk about that. Not of other A lot of other news today. Some stuff happened on the Hill. Politico reported that Trump was telling people Musk was leaving pretty soon. The White House has denied it. We'll talk about that a little bit. And uh, there's some other stuff going on. Nothing huge. We're going to talk a lot about tariffs, is my point, because that's really the biggest news. Um, with us, David Bahnsen, the Bahnsen Group, happens to be the sponsor of this show and an expert on all things tariff. So David's going to help walk us through that. And Natalie Allison of the Washington Post, who covers the administration, will be here. We'll talk about Musk a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more about the fallout from yesterday. But we're going to spend a lot of time on the tariffs. As always, if you want to be in on the conversation and you're here on the two-way platform, please raise your hand. As always, the question should be evocative of peace, love, and understanding. And if you're watching on YouTube or on X, thank you for watching. No reason to write negative things about people that are personal attacks in the chat. Attack me all you want. I barely care. Barely. And I don't usually read the chat, as you know. But I'd rather you not attack other people personally. And that goes if somebody on the far left or the far right. This platform's for everybody to try to have a free exchange of ideas. And I'll say one more time, if you hear something you disagree with, rather than being angry about it, use as an opportunity to learn what other people in America are thinking. My guess is most things that you hear said will be representative of the viewpoint of tens of millions or at least millions, and you should be interested in that. All right, put up number one, Sam. The big headline off the tariffs is 10% tariffs on all imports and additional taxes for some 60 countries. I was interested in the use of the word taxes there. We're going to show you some of what the president said. And by the way, if you like Donald Trump vaudevillian, you're going to want to watch the whole event because he did all the stuff of calling people out and making jokes and saying things no other president in modern history would have said. I tweeted at one point during the event, which lasted about an hour. I really wonder if George H.W. Bush were alive, what he would have thought of it, because this was like nothing from the Bush era that anybody could imagine a president doing. Um, and really, if you took a transcript of the event and you crossed out everything the president said that had nothing to do with explaining what's in the tariffs as announced, you'd be left with very little. I mean, like three paragraphs maybe. The rest of it was just Trump riffing on all manner of things, including talking to members of Congress about nothing to do with tariffs, and just again all manner of things. So let's bring in our guest. And again, I want to do kind of a broad 80,000-foot overview of what was announced, and then we're going to show some of the president, and we'll bring in our two guests. David Bahnsen, been here before, as I said, Bahnsen Group, sponsor of the program, and delighted to welcome Natalie Allison of the Washington Post in to join us as well. Natalie, thank you for joining. Were you at the event today?
Hey, Mark. Yeah, thanks for having me. I just hustled back to K Street
Okay,
from the
awesome.
White House. I was there.
All right, awesome. Thank you for that. I planned to go, but my schedule got a little messed up. Just before we bring David in to talk tariff nuts and bolts in a way that, no offense to either of us, but probably would be a little beyond our capacity.
No
Just
offense taken.
talk about the scene. There were the whole. He said almost the entire cabinet was there. Just talk about the scale, scope, and vaudevillian nature of the thing.
I appreciated how much you were struck by how different it was from other White Houses because I think for me as a reporter who has spent most of my time covering Trump on the campaign trail the last few years, I'm almost desensitized
Yeah.
to how different it was. And so to me, it felt low energy because you have this rally-like concept. You have people in the crowd that otherwise appear to be his base. The crowd was dotted with hard hats and neon vests and more people wearing jeans at a White House event than probably has ever occurred. But they're at the White House, and I think maybe they don't really know how to act. So Trump typically, when he's delivering his lines, that he did throughout his rallies, he's getting this like roaring applause and cheering, and that just wasn't there today. And so I sort of focused on how it differed from his rallies, and he didn't quite get the same energy level that he would there. But of course, we were at the White House, and it, of course, was much different than anything that would have happened the last few years.
Yeah, no, it's a great insight. And I had the same reaction early on. It seemed like he thought he was going to have a rally crowd. And the first two bombs he threw got a tepid reaction, and he just kind of went with it. And the thing about the jeans is so interesting. I didn't notice that on TV. I would say, based on what you said, there were more people wearing jeans at the White House today than cumulative in the entire 12 years of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, I would bet. Because back then, no one would show up in the White House in jeans, like nobody. And today, as you said, they did. All right, David Bahnsen, thank you for joining. I know you're not a huge fan of tariffs, and a huge, the biggest tariffs versus the smallest has been speculated about and previewed by various aides over the last few days.
Well, the second, because we're still kind of digesting some of the things that were said and meant, because it was formulaically done a little different than had been expected. So the three takeaways of what came out of his mouth in terms of hard data points, I mean, he's, and the first 48 of it was devoted to the trade side. At the end, I want to say a little bit about what he talked about, the tax bill,
Yeah.
Which I thought was an important takeaway. But it was basically a 10% baseline tariff on all imported goods. And the campaign, he threatened to do 20 or 25. It's gone up and down different levels since inauguration, but 10% was the number he announced today. He reiterated the 25% on all foreign auto imports, which he had already announced a week ago today. And then he announced this 50% reciprocity deal, which at a headline level, you could say, okay, that doesn't sound that bad. But the devil in the details is very confusing, because he's including in their tariff NTBs, non-trade barriers. He never said the word VAT today, so the factoring in what they perceive to be the impact of other countries' value-added tax. But he allowed commerce some leeway to go calculate what he thought the blended tariff rate was. But the problem is most of these countries have different tariffs on different products. So when you're now imposing it at a country level unilaterally, you're necessarily going to have some things that are going higher and some lower, but then they have this 10% baseline. So for example, they're claiming Israel has a 34% cost with us. So we were announcing 17 on them, but then Israel announced today they'll get rid of all of them. So the question is, are we going to 10 or are we going to 0? There's just ambiguity on what it looks like with particular countries and sectors. And this has been my forecast all along. I don't say this as a compliment, but where I really think it's headed now is to just a lobbyist dream of fighting for waivers. And the 2018 precedent here is substantial. There was 1.2 million exemptions and waivers granted, and I think you're going to see a significant amount of that now. But the headline takeaway you're asking me about, 10% baseline, 50% reciprocity, 25% auto, and by far the biggest impact, if this were all to go through as stated, would be with China.
Yeah. To explain the last part, why would the biggest impact be with China?
Because they're claiming that the cost of tariffs imposed by China on our imports and non-trade barriers is 68%, 67 or 68%. So a 34% cost on our imports from China, which is exponentially larger.
Right.
And then, of course, a much higher rate than had been forecast. Ironically, Japan and Vietnam are high up in the list, but had something like TPP happened, their tariff on us right now would be 0%.
Right.
So there's politically different things like that can unpack, but I don't think that's going to go anywhere. The other piece I would say, Mark, is that like you have countries that have virtually no tariffs on us, like Singapore, that they're showing a very high cost. So how do they have a high cost if there's not really tariffs? That's where there's Lutnick imposed subjectivity as to what these alleged non-trade barriers cost.
Yeah. Sam, if we can dip into Fox, Scott Bessent on, I'd love to just hear a little bit of that if possible. David, I saw chatter and got texts from people about Russia. Is Russia somehow exempt from these tariffs?
Well, not by what he stated at the White House. We're trying to get more material to understand. It may be because there's been different reports on Twitter. It was certainly not announced. It was certainly not announced in his presser of any particular inclusion or exclusion with Russia.
Right. Okay. And again,
I'll chime in on that.
Yeah,
The
go ahead,
White
Natalie,
House has
please.
said that they, due to the war, that basically trade is at zero with Ukraine and Russia right now, and so they are not on the list.
Okay, so they're not on the list because there's no need. David, if you can, what was announced today, to the extent you understand it, if it's a small, medium, large, jumbo, is this medium? It's my sense is it's medium compared to what was discussed. Think that's right?
Jumbo compared to what markets had begun to hope for, but
Right.
medium compared to where things were before. But the
Right.
futures just opened in New York and markets are down almost 1,000 points.
Right. Although, if we put up number two, the Bonson market report, in this country, everything was up. Now that was the close before the announcement.
Right. I'm talking about the futures and,
Yeah.
and overnight. And
Yeah.
so, for example, you have right now pre-market a company like NVIDIA, which is really caught up in a lot of this. You know, they're getting ready to hit prices that they haven't seen in quite. They've given up a whole year's worth of return.
Yeah.
At tomorrow's opening price right now.
As you know, my policy is never to predict judges, justices, or juries, but I do predict markets because I'm not in the business. I don't think there's going to be a crash tomorrow. I think my sense is everybody's like, yeah, whatever. Let's see if he takes them off. What do you think of that view?
Well, what you would be predicting then is that the futures are wrong right now, and
Yeah.
that happens. But there are real people right now betting in futures.
Yeah.
But they do tend to overdo things. There's the famous story, of course, election night back in 2016. But for the most part, futures are just simply global actors and hedge funds acting outside the cash market in advance. Now, that's also a different market than where things go from the open to the close. And I don't consider 900 points in the Dow a crash. I mean, a crash is not supposed to be something in the 1, 2, even 3% range. But I do believe it speaks to a couple things. Primarily, the markets are not feeling they got clarity. You know, there is not this real specific understanding. And we saw the CEO and CFO confidence report today going back to 3-year lows. All of those production-oriented confidence indicators, they become a self-fulfilling prophecy. In Q2, if capital goods spending dries up the way I'm seeing it dry up, you know, whatever they're attempting to do by way of fairness announcements, it's not going to matter if you dip into recession. So there's a few different things there. I'll let you rotate to where you want to go, but there is one more takeaway from today that I really do want to share.
Please.
I don't think very many people would have caught it because not a lot of people, you know, my company owns over $100 million of Johnson & Johnson stock. I've owned it, followed it, been an analyst inside of J&J for over 20 years. And he announced that Johnson & Johnson had announced a $55 billion investment in the United States. And it occurred to me how right I think I am as to how much a lot of this is going to be driven to getting headline announcements and not substantive policy. Johnson & Johnson spent $40 billion in U.S. investment over the last 4 years. The $55 billion is not 1 year, it's over 4 years. So they basically announced they're going to spend about 12 to 15 billion more than they've been doing anyways over 4 years. That's a few $1 billion. That is their lunch T&E money.
Yeah.
And yet he was holding it out from the Rose Garden today as a big issue. I expect a lot of announcements like that from President Trump.
The technical the term in economics for the delta between what they had spent and what they're going to spend is right. That's what economists call it. I agree with you. That's what everybody seems to be anticipating, or some people do, including announcements from private companies and announcements from firms. Natalie, as you watch the president, you're a veteran watcher of Donald Trump, and the other people in the White House staff and the cabinet secretaries, did they seem truly celebratory? Did they seem a little nervous? I sensed a little apprehension. Maybe I'm wrong, but do you have a read on their general attitude about what today was about?
Nobody was beaming. I will say, like,
Yeah.
his staff around the White House did seem a little bit jittery ahead of it. And I
Yeah.
think part of it is there was so much hype for this, and being there in that moment, I won't say it was low energy, but it felt much more serious than this like celebratory event. I
Yeah.
think I was picturing I'd get there and see everybody waving little American flags or something.
Yeah.
But I think because this was something that had been so tightly held, and there was, some trepidation about what would happen, and the public opinion on this for sure, but not to mention the markets. We see the timing of this press conference probably factored that in. But no, I don't think that they were overly celebratory. They definitely have put on, happy faces about it, and said this is, the greatest policy that's ever been enacted, and framed this as a really historical moment. But yeah, just being there, it was certainly not the most celebratory of Trump events
Yeah.
that we've seen.
So two things. One I know was absent, and one I think was absent. You'll confirm for me that I thought might occur. One is he didn't take questions from the press,
Correct.
not uncommon for him to take questions. And the other is, you tell me if I'm wrong, previous administrations, if they had an event like this, there'd be a background briefing either in the Roosevelt Room or by a conference call with senior officials, sometimes on background, sometimes not, walking people through the policy. That didn't occur, right?
It actually did. It was last minute. It was called very last minute,
Oh,
but they did
okay.
a 3 o'clock.
Tell us about that.
They did a 3 o'clock background call with Peter Navarro and Jameson Greer. Caroline spoke for a few moments, but they didn't give us specifics. So they didn't tell us the rates at all. They just basically said there will be some kind of reciprocal tariff. They didn't get into the details. A lot of it was Peter. He kept using the phrase like the president is doing this out of the kindness and goodness of his heart, that he's not going to do a full reciprocal tariff, like very exaggerated language about the circumstances
Right.
surrounding it. But we didn't get a lot of specifics. So to your point, going into this briefing, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New York Times, so on and so forth, we didn't have the specifics of what the tariff situation would be.
Yeah. Okay. Two more questions, and I want to show some from the president. And again, if you want to be in on the conversation, question or comment, please raise your hand. David, what's the point if you're trying to have a level playing field and if you're trying to force action on the part of these other countries? What's the point of charging half of what they charge? Shouldn't we charge either what they charge or a percent more than what they charge?
Well, the problem is that it is not what they charge. It's applying an arbitrary test of non-trade barriers. That's the vast majority of this. It's not a literal tariff.
Yeah. Right.
Mark, there's a lot of studies that indicate we have a higher tariff on them than they do on us with many of these countries in aggregate.
Right.
And then there's certain parts and products that have graduated levels. So it gets very complicated. But when he's saying half of what they charge, it's because they're trying to use a denominator of what they charge that
Right.
includes a measurable tariff cost and an immeasurable non-trade barrier.
Right. All right. Last question, David. Technical question I get asked all the time. Saying the tariffs are on and they begin immediately, are they filing paperwork with the World Tariff Bureau? And isn't it the case that taking them off is effortless? If he says, I like Norway, I want to take the tariffs off, they're off in 20 minutes, however they come off. Is that the case?
Yeah, if you're not talking about the complexity of calculating the amount. So the USMCA, the NAFTA 2.0 deal from the Trump first administration, had like 15 million products. And if they had to go through line item and figure out which ones were moving and which ones weren't, if that was happening in Mexico and Canada, that's what would take a lot of time before they could implement. That is using a national security pretext to do this unilaterally, does allow it to go through. Where it begins being assessed, that it remains to be seen. He said effective midnight tonight on autos, but how quickly it comes off, that it should be much quicker, yes, because it's all being done essentially by the pen of the executive branch.
Right. Okay. Let's look at a little bit of the president. Love to get you both react. These are just to give you a sense of the mood and the tone of the whole thing. Sam, please play number 3. This is the president of the Rose Garden this afternoon.
This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, in American history. It's our declaration of economic independence. For years, hardworking American citizens were forced to sit on the sidelines as other nations got rich and powerful, much of it at our expense. But now it's our turn to prosper, and in so doing, use trillions and trillions of dollars to reduce our taxes and pay down our national debt, and it'll all happen very quickly. With today's action, we are finally going to be able to make America great again, greater than ever before.
All right, and go play right into number 4, please. Number 4.
The United States can no longer continue with a policy of unilateral economic surrender. We cannot pay the deficits of Canada, Mexico, and so many other countries. We used to do it. We can't do it anymore. We take care of countries all over the world. We pay for their military. We pay for everything they have to pay. And then when you want to cut back a little bit, they get upset that you're not taking care of them any longer. But we have to take care of our people, and we're going to take care of our people first. And I'm sorry to say that. And today we're standing up for the American worker, and we are finally putting America first.
Natalie, this seems so loosey-goosey to me, right? Like David's paid to know every detail here, and I'm hearing from lots of people in the same line of work, and they're asking me questions. Is the White House being purposely opaque about this, or are they disorganized, or why don't we have a clearer sense? Because what we just heard from the president was just a bunch of rhetoric and not the numbers and timetables and specifics.
I mean, leading up to this, they were so tight-lipped about it, and not just the press, business and industry leaders, and even people on the Hill who were trying to get information out of the administration were having a really difficult time. And part of that, a lot of people gathered, was because the administration hadn't quite worked out what was going on, and they were trying to enact this monstrous of a policy, this massive policy that historically, this is not how you would come up with a new tariff plan, not on this timeline, not this quickly. Setting an arbitrary liberation day is, great for branding purposes, but maybe isn't the most practical when it comes to really working out the details. And so, I mean, I do think this information was fairly new. For a number of people, I think the last couple of days they've had it worked out, but loosey goosey is probably an accurate enough term, at least from an outsider's perspective. They could argue that they had it all buckled up inside, and they did do a really good job of controlling leaks in this situation.
Yeah.
They did, and I was actually stunned that it didn't leak before.
David.
Mark, CNBC is reporting that the White House just announced that gold, copper, pharma, and semiconductors and lumber are all exempt from the tariff.
Those are some big exemptions. Read that list again. Gold, copper, lumber.
I just can't.
Lumber is exempt?
Yeah.
Who are they?
This is what CNBC is reporting. There's no attached story.
Yeah.
And it's just a headline right now, but it's breaking in the last 45 seconds.
All right. I got Jim Cramer on, and we'll see what he says. David, what are the things we don't know right now? Obviously, we didn't know that. So if that's true, that's big. But like, what are your unanswered questions, the major ones that normal people, real people, regular people could understand?
What the off-ramp will be. I do not believe these things will stick and will go all the way through. I do not believe we face the structural cost increases for years to come that some of these tariffs announced today would represent. I think the biggest unknown is what the off-ramp will be. I am more optimistic that this president has the talent to find an off-ramp and claim a victory. But at the end of the day, the big unknown is what exactly is going to be charged versus what is going to be threatened.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to go to your questions. I want to play a little bit more from the president and talk about a few other issues, but we'll look for the CNBC update and see if people match it, because that's obviously as many would say a big deal, and as Donald Trump would say, it's bigly important. So bring folks in, as always. Tell us where you are and what's on your mind about tariffs for Natalie Allison of the Washington Post and David Bahnsen of the Bahnsen Group. Ken, welcome in. Unmute. Go ahead. Got to unmute first, Ken. One more time. There you go. Oh, try it again. One more time. Nope, still don't have you. Ken, try one more time, and if not, I'm going to switch you out and we'll bring you back. There you go.
Sorry.
All
I
good.
had questions on the voting yesterday. If you want to talk about trade, I'm fine. I'll come back some other day.
Question on voting, meaning?
You had 2 points. One was what happened to all the former Trump voters, and two, why are the Democrats getting all the small donations?
On the special. I'm going to bring you back for those because I want to stick for trade for now. But thank you. So again, if you got your hand up and you don't want to talk about trade, put it back down and we'll get to you before too long. Let's bring in Chris Taylor. Chris, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind.
I think so. Northern Idaho, Moscow, Idaho, University of Idaho town, all that area. Just a quick note, since you asked Russ before, I'll just say some of my family is on the way to the Philippines to build the first nuclear reactor SMR over there. So just been a lot of traction. They're moving forward.
First nuclear reactor ever in the Philippines?
Well, so they actually built a monster one, but it was never turned on. So the whole thing was completed, but I think in the late 70s.
And which technology will this use?
This is using the SMR. Essentially, you should ask Isaiah.
All right. Well, keep us posted. Send us photos. Yeah. Go ahead on trade.
Okay, so on the trade, a week or so ago, Howard Lutnick did a all-in podcast where he discussed some of the trade stuff or the tariff. He seemed to be pushing more of a systemic, like transformational, no more income tax, that type of thing. Like this is like a much bigger picture than what we're hearing now. I'm just curious, what is this really in play, or is it more of these minor back and forth adjustments?
Yeah, great question. Natalie, do you have a view on that?
No, I mean, in general, I think it's fair to say that Lutnick has been all over the place on tariffs, getting ahead of Trump, and trying to come up with good explanations the last couple of months. I don't have an answer specifically on that. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have come in on Tariff Day, Mark.
No,
but,
that's okay. That's all right. It's a big day, and there's.
I don't think that Lutnick has always been consistent with.
Yeah, I agree with that.
What the administration is doing, what he is even saying from interview to interview.
Yep, David, what's the truth on that point?
I just want to remind the two-way audience, I'm a lifetime Republican and I'm a conservative and I'm a Reaganite. That's the most laughable thing I've heard from any member of this administration at any time. What Secretary Lutnick is doing, saying something like that from his seat as a member of the cabinet, is so recklessly irresponsible. You were not repealing the income tax without a vote of the Senate. The idea that they can replace the revenue of a country that spends $6 trillion a year, all of it is so outside reality that I never care what's said on a campaign speech. It's a bipartisan thing that people just make stuff up when they're campaigning. It doesn't bother me. But Secretary Lutnick said that as a member of cabinet, as if it were a serious policy proposal. There is no world in which tariffs are replacing the income tax as ratified in the U.S. Constitution.
Chris, thank you. Good question. Appreciate it. David, do you know, are we a net importer or a net exporter of lumber?
Of lumber, we're a net importer.
Importer. And what percentage comes from?
Thanks to our allies to the north of us.
What percentage of it comes from Canada?
I don't know off the top of my head, Mark.
And do we export any lumber?
We import a lot of lumber.
But do we export any lumber anywhere?
We do, but it's not a significant commodity for us in export.
So that's what I thought. So exempting lumber seems like a big deal.
Well, it's essentially, there's only one reason to do it.
Yeah, it's to
avoid the cost to housing that it would create.
Yeah. Well, and also obviously high priority for Canada. So it's giving them something pretty important to them,
and
right?
Trump
I don't think he's doing it as a handout to Canada. Yeah. I think it's an acknowledgement that the cost to the U.S.
would be too high. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Natalie.
I was just saying, Trump spoke to the idea of exemptions today, and he did not say there would be no exemptions, but he framed it this way. So he was framing it as like he was going to be tough on other countries. He said, when queens and prime ministers and ambassadors are going to come to me asking for exemptions, I'm going to tell them, we'll stop the tariff when you stop yours. But he didn't speak to specific industries. And so the way he framed himself as being very tough on this and not interested in giving exemptions was like purely from a foreign relations perspective and not about industries. So he didn't say there wouldn't be exemptions, but he did say that he would say no if countries asked for them.
Right. Interesting. Thank you for that.
My
I missed that
understanding,
part.
Natalie, is that these exemptions, certainly this was the case in the first term, these aren't requests from countries. We're talking about exceptions from American importers that are asking to be exempted.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
His framing was when queens and prime ministers ask me for exemptions, I will tell them no, that you can end your tariffs.
Yeah. So obviously, sometimes there is a confluence of interest between an exporter and an industry in this country, which is heavily reliant on what that country's exporting into the United States. And the president can always point to the
my
domestic.
point there was just being that, it is him trying to use this situation, even if that isn't a scenario that would occur, to, push the America first, tough on everybody else line.
Absolutely. Dustin, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind.
Thank you, Mark. Calling from Murfreesboro, Tennessee. David, you had mentioned you're saying Q2 capital expenditures drying up. We're locked in this race to the finish with China for AGI. Do you expect that these tariffs are going to have any impact on data center build outs and everything that's required to power that race on the US side?
The data center build outs are such a long-term capital commitment that I'm not so much focused on things with a lifeline of 3, 5, 7, 10 years as the decisions that would have to be made in Q2 and Q3 of a 6, 9, and 12-month timeline. And again, February already bore this out. So I'm not just predicting, but I'm also describing capital goods, non-defense capital goods contracted in February, and they had been up almost 1% in January. And so I would not yet worry that you'd see a significant decline in data center build-out commitments as a result of trade war. But inversely, when you're talking about long-term things, I'm not optimistic that there's going to be long-term commitments to onshore U.S. auto part manufacturing either. It's going to cost $4 or $5 billion, and they all know a new president's coming in 3 years. I just am not sure that companies are going to commit to doing the building any more than some of those long-term expenditures are going to get cut that are on the side you're talking about. The only other caveat I'll give, and I'll move on. I would have the data center vulnerability could be there if Trump had never uttered the word tariff, if President Trump had never uttered the word tariff. There was already skepticism that there could be potential decline in hyperscaler order flow in 2025. So that's a vulnerability, but maybe one a little less connected to my story on CapEx and trade war.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dustin. Let me read you some things that have been sent to me off of Twitter from reliable sources. Some of these things David and Natalie have already mentioned, but I think they're all pretty interesting. Contrary to the White House press secretary saying that the tariffs would be in effect immediately, the 10% tariffs go into effect on the 5th at midnight, and the president has what's called modification authority, so he can change them up or down however he wishes. And the individualized highly reciprocal tariffs take effect April 9th at midnight or 12:01 a.m. Again, leaving now a week for countries to try to change that. In addition, here's the list very similar to the one David read. As of right now, the following items are not subject to the tariffs: pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, copper, lumber, steel, aluminum, auto and auto parts already subject to Section 232 tariffs, gold, silver, energy, and other minerals that are not available in the U.S. The president is considering specific tariffs for the items above. There you see it on, is that CNBC? Is that what we're watching there? Yeah. Yep. Okay. Natalie, I've seen a few cabinet members already out. I know others are going out. Is the president expected to talk more about tariffs? I know he's leaving, right? He's leaving town tomorrow. So are there more tariff events planned, or is this pretty much not going to be up to the cabinet and other government officials?
There's certainly nothing planned, and his staff is telling us they don't expect anything at the White House before his departure. I think he'll be at a live dinner potentially tomorrow. evening after the tournament, and so I don't know what press access will be tomorrow. I think in general they're trying to limit who's around tomorrow to sports reporters. So it's unlikely that there will be any kind of remarks between now and tomorrow morning.
Okay, we don't have a sports reporter, but we do have Robert, a two-way community member, says Bethlehem Steel EVP. Steel industry is quite interested in tariffs. Robert, welcome in. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, and of course, as it relates to my executive position with Bethlehem Steel, that's of course completely facetious because the former Dow Jones Industrial Average member of Bethlehem Steel has been destroyed by poor government policy over the past quarter century. And I think that what everybody is forgetting is the fact that President Trump is speaking to his base in every swing state, from where we are in Pennsylvania to Wisconsin to Michigan, when the auto worker was there and said, I have seen over my lifetime every factory, every plant, every mill closed down, to the extent whereby he's making all sorts of noise. It was complete music to our ears out here, because we live in this wasteland and we understand global markets. And yes, David Bonson, I also voted for Ronald Reagan and all of that other stuff. But, at some point, somebody needs to speak up for us. And this is why we voted for Donald Trump. Full stop. How the tariffs work out or anything like that, and whether or not any of these jobs will ever come back, almost is performative for us. At minimum, somebody's heard us out here from the endless decades of hurt that we felt out here economically. That's all I got to say.
Robert, thank you. Natalie, I'd love you for you to respond. I'll just say the Canadian Prime Minister has announced unspecified retaliatory moves in response to what the president said. So Natalie, go ahead.
Fascinating development. I mean, I thought it was a brilliant move on the White House's part to bring out Brian Pannebecker, who is the Auto Workers for Trump leader, who he would haul out to a lot of his Rust Belt rallies. Brian would speak at a lot of those and spoke to the things that were just being discussed, the concerns. And I don't know that anybody could listen to Trump's tariff plans, any typical working class voter. I would put myself in the same category of people who would hear a tariff plan and not necessarily know how exactly it would impact my life. And I don't think that they're, as he said, I don't think they're actually judging it on that, but they want to hear him say, we're going to try to bring back the jobs. We're doing what was never done. And it doesn't really matter right now to them what any critics are saying about what's going to happen with these tariffs. Certainly, they may or may not feel the effects from the prices really soon, but I don't think any of them are holding their breath that the jobs are going to pour back in. I don't think they're under the illusion that is going to happen, but they want to hear Trump say that he has them in mind. Yeah, and that's what Trump is doing.
I think that's a really important point. I don't know if it's true or not that the working class people that are really enamored by the fact that it feels that President Trump is paying attention to them, I don't know if it's true that they don't care what happens, that at least they finally got someone who's showing some empathy. But I accept full stop that there is this political and emotional benefit. It's just from my vantage point, I care about the working class beyond them feeling good. I want policies that are genuinely going to help. And I think that's the issue here, is if you create the appearance of trying to do something that benefits domestic manufacturers, and it doesn't, and it does come at a cost to the service industry or some other aspect of American economy, you haven't got the upside of the people you set out to help, and you have opened up a further downside, which I believe hurts consumers who are working class people too, and hurts other elements in the working class.
Well, they've just spent 4 years saying that Biden has made it hard for them to go to the grocery store, pay their bills. And so it's, prices go up. Well, it's going to be really hard to be angry at Trump when they've just spent 4 years being really angry at Biden about it. And so they're going to try to see the silver lining for as long as they can, certainly.
Yeah, great point. Tim, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind.
How's it going, everyone? So I'm from Dallas, Texas, and I'm actually just going to relay something I saw from Twitter that's pretty fascinating. It's from Orthonormalist, but that trade barrier calculation is actually based off of the trade surplus divided by the export. I ran it through an AI and I checked all the numbers, and it's plus or minus 2% for each of those numbers based on that calculation. And when it's below 10%, it's 10%. Or if we have a surplus with them, it sticks, it's 10%. So
Yes.
it's directly related to that.
You are correct. That is apparently the back of napkin that our Commerce Department did, is divide the trade deficit by exports.
That's the trade barrier. Pretty fascinating.
Interesting, Tim. Awesome use of the technology. David, if Bob Lighthizer were running this show, would it look different than you think it's come out?
You know, I don't know, because the problem in answering that is that when Bob Lighthizer was there, the voice that was on the other shoulder of the president, let's call it the aggregate of Larry Kudlow, Steve Mnuchin, Gary Cohn, the Steve Moore camp, I think the voice was a little louder then. And so Lighthizer's proposals and implementation was nowhere near as severe as what was announced today. But I think that might have more to do with just a shifting of the voices on the two respective shoulders of the president, that it seems to me Stephen Miller, Pete Navarro, the ghost of Bob Lighthizer, and Jameson Greer are crowding out the Trump 1.0 voices.
Yep. Tim, thank you. Really appreciate it. Natalie, I was on the Hill a little bit when I was in Washington, and there's a lot of trepidation up there, as you know, amongst Republicans. Do you have any sense of how congressional Republicans felt about today? Many of them were at the event. Do they seem on board, or do they continue to be skittish about this?
I mean, you have a handful of people who are going to speak out against something Trump does, Republicans on the Hill, and everybody else is going along with it. Speaker Johnson just a year ago was saying that he didn't actually think Trump was going to take these actions, that these types of tariffs were not necessarily going to happen. Trump's just throwing it out there. And then there he was, front and center today at this announcement, and they're all celebrating it. We've seen that with a number of policies. I think we'll continue to see that. And so it remains to be seen if Republicans on the Hill will suddenly chime in and perk up and say something that they haven't so far, but they've had plenty of opportunities in the last month or so to do that, and everyone has just sort of tiptoed around it and said, we'll wait and see. So I don't know. I think, Johnson is just a stunning example of what a lot of these people think they have to do right now, with Trump being who he is.
Yep. Speaking of Trump being who he is, this is a video the White House put out today. Please play number 6.
People are tired of seeing the United States ripped off. I'd make our allies pay their fair share.
The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. We're going to reclaim our wealth. This is the beginning of Liberation Day in America.
Saw at the top of that younger Donald Trump, who again widely commented on, has been a fan of tariffs for quite some time. Reconciliation. There were meetings today at the White House with the president and some Republican senators, not on tariffs, but on this question of how quickly they can move reconciliation. There are many Republicans, including some of the administration, who are closeted, not fans of tariffs so much, who say what we really need to do is pass tax cuts, energy, deregulation, and all the things that will be in reconciliation to offset the negative effects of that. Natalie, where do you think things stand on that bill becoming a reality summer or early fall?
Well, they're still trying to figure out the funding of it all. I mean, even down to should we start selling off public land? So all of these things are being considered right now, and I don't think it could happen before fall. I think there's still a lot of disagreement on how exactly they're going to figure out reconciliation. But I think that the next couple of weeks will be interesting. How we see some of these members who were holding their fire. They weren't going after Trump. They weren't criticizing the rumors of his tariff plan. Whether they speak up and say, this isn't going to solve any problems here.
David, where do you think reconciliation stands?
I think that the president incorporating that into the last 5 minutes of the presser today with the gusto that he did, and really at this point being all in with significant political capital on one bill, as opposed to a sort of ambivalence about whether it was one versus two previously. I think there's a better chance that getting done. But again, he made the comment today, there'll be no cuts to Medicare, social, or Medicaid. And again, there's wiggle room, because if all he means is that they're going to reduce the growth of spending of Medicaid, then that will still give them the spending cuts necessary to get reconciliation done and have some degree of tax cuts left over. But the math is just very hard here. And so I still think the hard part that could have killed it early was the budget, and Speaker, with President's help, got that part done. Now reconciliation and a process that really does come to an end in May. There's still plenty of things that can go wrong, but it's still alive. It's still going. I was on Speaker Gingrich's podcast the other day, who, as you know, Mark, is a huge fan of you and two-way, and he is very confident that they will end up getting this done. My issue is not so much if they get budget reconciliation done or not in May, which is not a foregone conclusion, but I'll give it 50% odds. And I think that's what you're asking me. My issue is, what will it be? You know, if they simply get a budget reconciliation bill done and it does extend the Trump tax cuts, but it's 5 years, not permanent, that's fully priced in and then some. Markets are not going to like that. If there's no additional tax cuts, or the only additional tax cuts are this absurdity about deducting interest on auto loans for US-made cars, which will push prices higher. I mean, there's not a serious tax thing on top of extending the 2017 deal right now that I see. So I'm more concerned with the composition than a bill getting done.
I assume you don't think no tax on tips or Social Security or overtime are significant things?
Well, no tax on Social Security is not even close to being doable in budget reconciliation mathematically.
Yeah.
That's a massive cost that's just simply not going to make its way onto anybody's napkin.
Yeah.
No tax on tips can fit in, and it's probably the most important for the president politically.
Yeah.
Myself, as a supply sider, I don't find it to be a very compelling tax cut.
Yeah. I'm almost certain no tax on tips will be in there. It's not that big of an item, and it's symbolically, as you said, so important. All right, let's talk about Musk. Natalie, you ever heard of this outfit called Politica or The Politica? You ever heard of that place?
Yeah, maybe read them once or twice.
Yeah. All right. So The Politico, number 7, Sam, had a scoop, although there's a term in Natalie's business called permanent scoops, things that don't actually come true. Trump tells Inner Circle that Musk will leave soon. Here's what Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, tweeted about that scoop. Number 8 basically denied it. He says, this scoop is garbage. Elon Musk and President Trump have both, quote unquote, publicly stated that Elon will depart from public service as a special government employee when his incredible work at Doge is complete. Of course, complete is in the eye of the beholder. Natalie, what do you know about the status of Musk's presence?
I mean, Musk himself, he said it to Brett Baer. He said that, you know, when the 130 days are coming up, that he's going to be winding down and he's going to be getting back to his business. And then Trump said as much in the Oval Office on Monday. So, you know, in this business, whoever sometimes becomes the first to string together things that are in the ether, and you get a background quote, you can put scoop on it, and your outlet marketing team can make a big deal about it. But you know, Elon was always going to have an out for his office and everything else.
Right. Very well said. David, Musk is the richest person in the world. He started many businesses, not just successful, but historically successful. How does the business community, which normally would say in the abstract, we love having a successful CEO in power because they understand the private sector, how does the business community now view Musk's presence?
Well, I don't think it's monolithic, Mark. The business community is not a person. There's really different actors, all from Silicon Valley to Wall Street to small business and Fortune 500, and the technology sector is going to be different than other spaces. So I think, like the population at large, it's a mixed bag.
All right. I set myself up for that answer by asking such a general question. Let's take Fortune 500 CEOs. Do you think they're glad that Musk's there?
Yes, I bet you I'm not a Fortune 500 CEO, but I wouldn't be surprised if their temperament and feeling about Musk is similar to mine. I hold him in a very high regard for his ability to get things done, but wish he would do this in a more orderly and shall we say, effective way.
All right, let me ask it this way, a little gimmicky. Say there was a meeting of the Business Roundtable, and Josh Bolton, the head of the Business Roundtable, walked in the room and said, "I've just been handed a note that Elon Musk has resigned." What would they cheer? Would they gasp? Would they boo?
They would ask who is replacing him.
Because they're cold, bloodless, result-oriented people.
You know who they would have liked?
Yeah.
Is Vivek.
Yeah, you think?
I think Vivek they saw as a very sober-minded operator.
Huh? That surprises me.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, it surprises me too because
Yeah.
as a campaigner,
He was a
I
hothead.
learned to dislike him. But I think
Yeah.
that Vivek would have been capable in that role. I do.
Interesting. All right, I want to play number 9, Sam. This is Rahm Emanuel. We talked about this morning on the morning meeting, question of whether Rahm Emanuel's decision to join an investment firm means he doesn't plan to run for president. And here's an interview he did today with Chris Cillizza, who attacked me the other day. And despite that, because I believe in peace, love, and understanding, I'm playing a soundbite from his program.
Weak and we're woke. And the American voters read us pretty well. Now, I happen to think the other side's vulnerability is they're corrupt and they betrayed you. Yep. Now, if you're going to run on our weaknesses, I'm going to start pointing out your weaknesses. And if you look at Wisconsin and you look at the elections yesterday, the voters are already seeing the Musk's piece, etc. Besides him, is the corruption, the money, and also the betrayal. I never asked you to talk about Canada and Greenland. I want my groceries.
America, right?
Yeah. Grandma's on the phone; she can't get her Social Security check. Okay, right. And she's out in the cold, and Vance is up in Greenland, in the cold. What is this?
Natalie, what do you think of that?
No, of course, his new gig doesn't mean he won't run for president, and I think
it doesn't mean he won't.
No, I don't think.
Okay.
I actually don't think he will run, but I don't think it's because I don't think that would prevent him from running. If he wakes up in the morning, a month or two from now and decides that's what he wants to do, I don't think that would stop him from doing it. I don't think he's going to run.
What makes you think he won't run?
I mean, I think a Rahm Emanuel JB Pritzker primary would be really fun to watch unfold, but I don't think he has the ambition to try to be the face of the current Democratic Party. I don't think that's there.
All right, David Bahnsen, Rahm Emanuel has previously worked in finance and made a lot of money. I think he worked for like some German firm or a firm that was bought by a German firm. Why would an investment firm hire him now? What value does he bring?
Well, there's a lot of people in Washington that have gone on to either private equity, hedge fund, advisory, asset managers. I could give a list of people. Some of them are down the street from my building right now.
Yeah.
And it's generally their Rolodex. They bring a certain gravitas. There's a headline announcement. Some of it's more cosmetic. They have them speak at events. It's not that they're inside deal making. I disagree, though. I don't think anybody who wants to run for president in this country wants to go work at a finance firm before they make the announcement. I think back to Senator Clinton's speeches at Goldman Sachs, which was really the beginning of the end for her, something that Bernie Sanders used very effectively to beat her up with that base. I think you go to private equity or an asset manager when you want to get paid, not when you want to run for office in the future. So that should give you some indication of my intention of ever running for office.
Yeah. All right.
Fair point, David.
All right, let's finish up on tariffs. Natalie, again, the president's leaving town and we don't expect him to do much. Are we going to see cabinet members like on the Sunday shows and into next week talking about tariffs, or it's going to play out in a different way?
Oh, absolutely. This will be another flood the zone strategy. And they've already said, their messaging the next couple of days is going to be, they're going to try to make it all tariffs. And of course, if Trump does make himself available for a gaggle, we will try to get him onto something else besides that. But they're going to try to focus on tariff. And I have no doubt that the Sunday shows will be their surrogates out there praising how the economy has already dramatically begun to turn around.
David, play out the next 5 days, say into next week. If you're right, and I've been in the same camp from the beginning, that we're going to start to see veering towards exit ramps and climb downs, where will that show up? Will we see private conversations? Will nothing happen until there's white smoke from the president doing a victory lap? Will other countries publicly muse? Where will we see, how can we track the potential exit ramp?
I think it's very important that the market be down 1,000 points tomorrow. The futures are worsening, not getting better. I think if you're gonna open tomorrow down 1,000 and then you close down 200, that delays substantially the urgency towards off ramp. I think markets really capitulating accelerates the pressure on the president and intensifies his incentive to find an off ramp. And then to your second question, yes, those are exactly the things that would indicate the off ramp coming. Israel announcing we're going to get rid of tariffs. Some other company announcing they're going to go, put up a factory in Alabama. That kind of stuff. So it's going to be a combination of those things, but the catalyst that incentivizes the pressure on the White House is markets always and forever, the greatest discounting mechanism in human history.
So you're going to go to sleep tonight. What time will you wake up Eastern time tomorrow?
Oh, Eastern time, 6:40, because I'm in California. So I get up 3:40 local time, no matter where I am.
All right. Well, you don't get up at 3:40 local time wherever you are.
Yeah,
you get up 3:40 local time wherever you are?
No matter what.
Well, not if you're in Asia.
Well, I don't go to Asia, so that's true. If I went to Asia, I'd have to recalculate it. But New York and California, no matter where, I'm getting up at 3:40 where it is there.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So if you get up at 3:40 Eastern, but no, 3:40 Pacific, 6:40 Eastern tomorrow, what will you look at first to see what the overnights have done? Like, where do you go to gauge where they are?
Well, the pre-market futures will be heavily trading, and
but are you using a Bloomberg terminal? What are you using to?
Yeah, we use FactSet, but it's all you can get Bloomberg feed, FactSet. You can go to Fox or CNBC.com and get it. It's just delayed.
And is it a single
yields are the other issue?
So is it like a single number or is it a series of numbers?
Well, I don't want to complicate things or bore people, but it's actually a fair value, and then you look at the futures and you have to net them against each other. So most of the tools we use do the math for you.
Right. And the futures, you'll see them at 6:40 Eastern, and then you'll watch them all the way through 9:30.
Sure. Yeah. I do. I mean, that's every morning though. Regardless of the drama of tomorrow.
And what probability do you assign that the markets in the U.S. will be up tomorrow?
10%.
10%. Natalie, you want a piece of that?
Well, I was going to say, David wakes up and looks at the Bloomberg terminals. I'm going to wake up and look at Truth Social, and I will assume that it'll be screenshots of what other Republicans have tweeted about how great the tariff plan was.
Does he truth a lot of screenshots?
Oh yeah, like you'll a lot of times, especially after after something that is perceived as controversial, they like to re-up the compliments that they've received for the announcement, which is typically sharing what other Republicans have said praising it.
Right. In the olden days, when a president or a presidential campaign put out a thing that said, "What are they saying?" WTAS.
Yeah.
It would be what journalists or columnists were saying. And this is not just the Trump people, because the Biden people did it too. Now when they put that out, it's their allies. It's like Joe Biden, what is Cory Booker saying? Donald Trump, what is Speaker Johnson saying? It's kind of I don't know what value they see in that document, because I don't know any reporter who would care what the allies of the person are saying.
To be fair, they put on an occasional what they were saying with news coverage, but
one in 20. I read them closely.
I don't think the screenshots on the Truth Social feed are really for anyone other than the president.
Yeah. I just like the fact that they hand him that and he's like, yeah, let me publicize that.
Yeah, why not?
Natalie and David, I couldn't be more grateful to both of you. Thank you for spending the hour with us and walking through this on what the president assured us all was one of the most important days in modern American history. David, thank you for sponsoring this program. Bahnsen Group, read David's newsletter that comes out daily that he writes himself called The Dividend Cafe. I highly recommend it. Many of you have already subscribed. It's free. Some of you haven't. Big mistake. Now's the time. Go to dividendcafe.com or the Bahnsen Group and subscribe. Natalie, where can people read your work?
WashingtonPost.com, or you can find me on X at Natalie_Allison.
Who has your handle without the underscore, or did you prefer the underscore?
It was like 2009. It wasn't available without the underscore, and so I was stuck with the underscore. I haven't rebranded, Mark, so
Yeah. Not that I'm predicting your departure from the Post, but these people who do in their handle, like Natalie Allen, Washington Post, like big mistake.
it's messy.
You may not work
It's
there
messy.
forever. And
Exactly.
I noticed somebody's channel today, it was somebody DC. And I'm like, don't do that. You may not live in
No,
DC forever.
I hope I don't live in DC forever. So no, I'm not going to do that.
Now, my Gmail does have NYC in it, but I'll always live in New York. There you go.
Yeah.
Again, thank you both for joining. Tomorrow on this network, call it network just for fun, 2-8 tonight, 23 hours from now. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time, Sean Dan and I, the morning meeting. And Michael Moynihan is on tomorrow. Do we have a graphic for that?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. Put that up. Michael Moynihan will be on the Moynihan Report at 4 Eastern. His guests, Gerald Posner and Mr. Foster, who's an incredibly compelling gentleman. If you've not watched the Moynihan Report, I urge you to sample it tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern time. 3 great programs, 9 a.m., 4 p.m., 6 p.m. Thanks again to Natalie and to David, everybody who raised their hand and participated. Those of you watching at home or on the Armed Forces Network, we're not on there yet, but I hope we will be soon. Have a good evening. Good night.
Thanks,